May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable unto you, O Lord, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. Today I want to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, and perhaps to yours also. At first, it might not seem like it has anything to do with our gospel reading from Mark, but I assure you that it does. So please bear with me and I'll explain it later in the sermon. I have a close friend who's struggling with her husband's drinking. During the pandemic, when they were both working from home, she noticed him picking up the drink a lot more often, and it hasn't slowed down since the countries began to open up. Everything she has done to get him to reduce his amount of drinking has failed. Quietly pointing it out to him, pleading, begging, and even talking with their couples therapist. Nothing has worked. She recently told me about her angst over this, and I told her what I had learned in Al-Anon. You may or may not know that Al-Anon is a 12-step support program for people who are concerned about a loved one's drinking. It was founded by the wife of Alcoholics Anonymous. I went to Al-Anon for a number of years, beginning at age 20, because my father's drinking was disrupting our family so much. And even when he, thank God, finally got sober, when he was 61 and I was 27, I kept going because I loved the Al-Anon philosophy and what it taught me about life and about having faith in a power greater than myself. For example, here's something from Al-Anon that I shared with my friend. It's called the 3 C's. You didn't cause it, you can't control it, and you can't cure it. If my friend's husband is addicted to alcohol, then he has a disease. Only he can take the steps to manage this disease if and when he is ready. Irritatingly enough, all of the pleading and begging in the world sometimes even makes the person with the drinking problem go in the opposite direction. So then what can my friend do? She can be honest and lovingly let her husband know that his drinking bothers her and that she's worried for him. Sometimes loved ones choose to do an intervention where a family or a group of friends meet with the drinker and tell them specifically how his or her drinking is affecting them. If this direct communication doesn't work, though, then loved ones must try and lovingly detach from the behavior of the drinker. What does that mean? It means stop counting how many drinks they have. It means not trying to hide or pour out the bottles. It means keeping comments about the time of day when they have their first drink to yourself. Above all, it means keeping your own emotions of anger and despair and worry in check by trying to find different outlets for them. It's very difficult, easier said than done. The person who loves the drinker must allow him or her to suffer whatever consequences might befall them as a result of their drinking. And they must focus on themselves instead of riding the tumultuous up and down waves that the disease of alcoholism, or any addiction for that matter, can cause. We are assured in Al-Anon that we all have a higher power, which many, including myself, call God, who can guide us away from our angst and towards a more peaceful life for ourselves, with or without the person who's causing us such great distress. It seems that Jesus, ever the teacher, was showing his disciples how to detach with love, and here's where we connect to our gospel story this morning. Here he was, in his own hometown, being painfully rejected by the people who most likely loved and supported him as he was growing up, his kin, as the gospel said. That must have hurt. But Jesus quickly realized that, as it says in this gospel reading, he could do no deed of power there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and cured them. In other words, he stopped trying to minister to those who didn't want to listen to him, and he focused on the few who did want to be healed. and then he left to go to other villages to teach. He even sent his disciples out to follow in his footsteps of teaching and healing with very specific instructions. If any place will not welcome you and they refuse to hear you, as you leave, shake off the dust that is on your feet as a testimony against them. Now, there are several examples of shaking the dust off your feet in the Bible. It probably began as a Jewish practice. One source says, it is recorded that when leaving Gentile cities, pious Jews often shook the dust from their feet to show their separation from Gentile practices. Now, if the disciples shook the dust of a Jewish town from their feet, it would demonstrate their separation from the Jews who rejected the Messiah. They wouldn't spend any more energy trying to convince those who didn't believe in the ways of Jesus. What an important life lesson. If only we could take it to heart. It applies in so many situations, not just in dealing with someone's drinking or other addictive behavior. If you're trying to teach or convince or cajole anyone into doing something or believing something that you think is important and they don't listen to you, maybe God's telling you to shake the dust off your feet and move on. Now, the hard part about this, of course, is deciding when and how to move on. My friend loves her husband, and she does not want to move on from the marriage. But she can move on in other ways. With help from her higher power, she can move on to focusing on what she needs to do for her own mental and spiritual health as she copes with this difficult situation. Another friend of mine is struggling with a job and wondering if she should leave it. She's kind of a community organizer, but the community she is working with right now doesn't seem to want her help or advice. She has a spiritual director, though, and when she told him about the situation, he said, Jesus didn't bang his head against the wall trying to force people to follow him. He invited them. They had to choose whether or not to join him. Pretty sure she's decided to leave this job and look for another. Turning to God and asking for help in detaching from my father's behavior helped me immensely as a young person who struggled to accept his alcoholism and all my fears and anxieties that came with it. I wasn't and still am not anywhere near perfect at this. I think it's human to let go and let God, as they say, and then take back all the worries again. But we're taught that God blesses our efforts, and I believe this is true. Try again and again to let go and let God. We all have the choice to follow Jesus' example. We can choose to try and change people, force an issue, and bang our heads against the wall. Or we can choose to let go and let God and ask God to help us detach with love from the people and the situations that cause us great distress. I'll end this sermon with the familiar words of the Serenity Prayer. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference.